Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I've got some exciting Dogman encounters from Michigan. Yes, the Michigan Dogman. Now, before I get into these encounters, a couple links I'd like to share. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merchandise to help this channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, my second channel, which is dedicated to creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give them a listen. You may just like what you hear. I also started a GoFundMe page to help raise some equipment for urban exploration, cryptid hunting, and ghost hunting videos. I will be uploading in late spring, early summer when it decides to dry out and warm up in upstate New York. Now I've taken enough of your time with rambling. Let's get on with these Michigan Dogman encounters, shall we? Today's first Dogman encounter brings us to Oceana County, Michigan, January 2016. I encountered a bipedal wolf-like creature here in western Michigan, and it's got me spooked. I was out shoveling snow, as it's common here in my state, and my encounter happened in a place just south of Rothbury, Michigan. I decided to take a walk in my friend's woods one day. That's when my life changed forever. My family owns 270 acres of land here in the city of Manistee, Michigan. I ventured out into those woods as I've done many times, probably 100 times before. The walk started as anyone would. I started to follow the creek south and check for deer stands on the property. The walk went as planned until I got about 300 yards south of the house. I stopped to have a quick cigarette and my eyes started to wander, scoping for deer and coyote. Gazing back and forth, I noticed a figure and I froze. Literally, I froze. This thing made eye contact with me and then stood up. It was hairy and very broad shoulders, amber-colored eyes, and let out a growl unlike anything I've ever heard. This wolf, as I call it, made 2 leaps and it was gone. The most surprising thing about this encounter was how silent the woods were right up until my encounter. Our second Michigan Dogman brings us to Manistee County, Michigan. I never saw it, but in 1975 I was newly married, about 21 years old, and had a small baby. My sister, who was a teenager, was visiting us. My husband, my sister, and I had all gone to our rooms to settle down and go to sleep. I would say it was around 11 or 12 at night, and we just started to relax and get sleepy, when out of nowhere there was this horrible, loud howl or yell. I mean, it was so loud it made my chest vibrate and my ears hurt. The sound was not human, but had a guttural, human-like sound mixed with what sounded like a wolf. We were living in a mobile home at the time, and it howled just outside of our back door, in the hallway near our bedroom. We jumped out of bed and we looked at each other and both said, "What was that?" My husband, who was 10 years older than I, is an avid hunter. He's the kind of guy that doesn't scare easy. His face drained of color. My sister came running down the hallway, white as a ghost, screaming, "What was that? What was that?" I told her I didn't know. My husband said he's getting his rifle and grabbed it out of the closet. He opened the back door and yelled into the wind, "You better get the blankety out of here or I'll blow off your head." He listened a moment before I yelled to him to shut the door. He did, and we never heard it anymore. Needless to say, we stayed up all night, afraid to go to sleep. I've never forgotten that howl, and there was no way a dog or coyote made that. It wasn't a guy joking around either. It was so loud, there was no way a human could have made that sound. Today's third Michigan Dogman encounter brings us to Manistee, Michigan. Hello, I live in rural West Michigan in a town of Manistee. It's located in Muskegon County, and I've had 3 different encounters with a wolf-like creature. The first encounter took place on or about February 2nd of 2016, about 4:30 in the morning. I was shoveling the driveway as it was snowing heavy and needed to clear a spot for the propane delivery. There were woods all around, but this encounter took place in the woods to the south. I was about halfway done with shoveling when I heard a splash in the creek. I thought it was a deer that I had spooked, so I stopped and started to scan the woods. Then, all of a sudden, this huge, wolf-like creature leapt into the air and took off with supersonic speed to the west. It crossed the road continuing west as I heard branches snapping right and left. I stood there in absolute frozen shock and amazement at what I had just seen. The second encounter took place April 11th, 2016, about 3:15 in the afternoon. I was a bit shaken up by the first encounter that this was my first trip into the woods since. I was walking my property, which consists of 30 acres of hardwood and creek bottom. I was crossing the creek, headed east, when I caught something out of the corner of my eye to the south. I was about 35 yards from what I thought was a black bear. It was tearing profusely at the west bank of the creek. Then it stood up and I froze. It turned around and stood up on its hind legs, and this was at least 7.5 feet tall, and I was in the middle of the creek and was absolutely crapping myself. I didn't want to run out of fear it would give chase, and the firearm I had brought didn't stand a chance against this thing. Then, all of a sudden, it put its nose straight into the air and sniffed a couple times. It looked immediately to the east, looked back at me with 2 huge strides, took off into the thicket headed east. After it cleared the thicket, it jumped into the trees and was leaping from treetop to treetop. This one had black fur and was matted and smelled horrendous, like rotten guts and sour fruit. The first wolf-like creature I saw was grayish in color with a little white in it. They both had pointed ears and a snout, a number of jagged-looking teeth and tails. The second one had much longer claws than the first one did. The third and final encounter happened May 2nd, 2016, at about 9:30. I was collecting some kindling from the woodline south of the house. I had just about finished when I heard a loud snap. I stopped and listened for any movement. I'm on the woodline, not in the woods, because by now I'm too frightened to step foot in them. Then I heard rustling sounds and another snap. This one sounded like bone, not a branch. The sounds intensify, so I click on my flashlight and start to scan the distance. As I get about halfway, I see glistening eyes, yellow in color, about 25 yards in front of me. I keep the light on it. It snarled and let out this deep growl sound that literally shook me. I started to back up, and again this thing stood up and bent over to pick something up. I kept the light on it. It picked up whatever it was after, turned around and looked at me like I had just interrupted something it was doing, and walked off into the woods to the south and just disappeared. The next day I had my cousin walk out with me to where the creature stood. What we found was a hide, just the hide of a white-tailed deer. I truly believe that the creature I saw was responsible for this. The creature I saw reminds me of a werewolf. In my 3 encounters, the one thing that freaks me out is how eerily silent everything got before the encounters. I have since found out that the property has many Indian burial grounds on it, heavily wooded with a freshwater creek running through the entire property. I used to walk the woods 4 times a week, and since my encounters, I have a very hard time walking to the wood line, let alone going into the woods by myself. Our 4th Michigan Dogman encounter brings us to Washtenaw County, Michigan. Mid-September 2005, July 20th, 2015, and February 21st, 2017. I've had 3 different encounters with 3 different creatures. I know what I saw. When I was younger, I saw what looked like a big wolf or a big German shepherd on its hind legs, running through very thick patches of woods. It only happened for a second, but I remember the long muzzle and pointed ears distinctly. The second encounter was more exciting. It was late at night after a small barbecue at my uncle's farm, miles from Ann Arbor. I was coming out of the barn to get some food when I heard sticks breaking in the tree line to my right. My first impression was that one of the dogs got outside, so I went to see if that was the case. I walked towards the sound and remember hearing the creature flinch because of the movement, stopped as I approached. I called out for the golden retriever and peered into the trees. The barn had a spotlight facing the house, and with the white paint job on it, they created a glow that allowed me to see better. About 7 feet off the ground, a long muzzle poked through the trees, followed by a full figure of this creature. It was only 20 feet from me, so I got the full picture. It was tall and lean, but very muscular. It had a distinct brown pelt on its body with blackish fur on its shoulders. It had huge paws for feet, but its hands looked like they had 5 fingers, so they resembled long human hands, except for the fur and claws on them. Its head was the scariest. This thing had a huge set of canines. It looked like it was snarling, but I believe it was trying to smile. I couldn't make out exactly what the eye color was because of how dark it was, but they pierced me to my soul. As the creature came into full view, I remember saying out loud, "Werewolf!" I backed up slowly, and the creature stood there, like a proud man standing over a deer it had just hunted. It watched me for about 30 seconds, but felt like 30 minutes. That's when my father, uncle, cousin, and grandfather all came out of the barn. When I tell you this thing ran, I mean it ran. It turned around, dropped to all fours, and leaned into the forest, making only the slightest noise. I told my cousin about it, but he didn't believe me. I knew my father wouldn't believe me because he doesn't believe anything I say. Now, in my backyard, the same type of creature knocked on my window. My curtains were drawn to give me a view to the woods. I live in the middle of the patch of woods near a fire road. I wasn't asleep yet and couldn't describe what was wrong, but I felt uneasy. I was trying to sleep when I heard a slight scrape on the house wall below my window. My window is 8 feet off the ground, and when I sat up in bed to see what was going on, I saw a head of what I can only describe as a werewolf in my window, which is only 10 feet from my bed. I cursed, jumped up, turned on the light, and grabbed my survival machete in my closet. I turned to see if it was still there, and it had disappeared. The next day, I went out to see if I could find any tracks or anything that might prove what I saw, but never found a thing. For about a day, I was unsure of myself, but I know these 3 times what I saw was definitely a dogman. Our 4th dogman encounter brings us to Saginaw County, Michigan, 2009. I was arriving home to my apartment at 11:45 p.m. when I felt a presence by the wood line. I saw something looking at me, and then finally I saw these eyes. It seemed like it was stalking me. I could only see the eyes and the shape of its head. I really couldn't see the body, but instantly I felt fear and went into my apartment. When I went inside, I started looking through the blinds just a little bit. I didn't want to move the blinds too much because I knew it would see where I was, so I didn't move them. Then I saw it heading my way. This beast looked like a bodybuilder with a wolf or dog-like head. Because of its silhouette, this thing must have been 7 to 8 feet tall. It stopped, just for a second, right in front of the window. Then it left. I've never feared for my life like I did that night. Our sixth Dogman encounter of Michigan brings us to Pontiac. Bald Mountain, Michigan, werewolf house. During the years between 1965 and 1974, I lived in Pontiac, Michigan. Now, I was a teenager at the time, and many local teens and other teens from surrounding areas would go to this area called Bald Mountain. On this property, there was an old brick house with bars on the window and a steel door. On the door, wolfsbane was painted, and local legend was a man was found in the house with his throat ripped out, and he thought there was a werewolf living in the surrounding woods. I've tried to research this story but can't find anything. I've often wondered if this was the Dogman, having spent many weekends at this house and many strange experiences. Sadly, the area is blocked off by the police to keep people from getting in, so if anybody knows anything, please feel free to comment in the comments below. Our seventh and final Dogman encounter of Michigan brings us to Ironwood, Michigan. My sighting occurred sometime in the winter of '92. I was 10 years old. I've always been an insomniac and would often be up in the middle of the night. This was the case on the night in question. I was in my bedroom looking out the window on the ground floor of my childhood home. I looked across the street and my eyes landed on something that paralyzed me with fascination. Leaning against a big tree in my neighbor's yard was this massive gray bipedal dog or wolf with huge muscular arms sniffing the air. He was just standing there, sniffing the air. The image has been burned into my mind ever since, the way the steam of his breath swirled out of his nose as he craned his neck from side to side. The way the snow stuck to his gray bristling fur, and the way his ears twitched. At first I told myself that it was just a big dog leaning on a tree. I couldn't accept what my brain was saying to me. There was this crazy feeling I had, and I don't know how to explain it. I still feel when I think or talk about it. It deeply disturbed me, and I swear it knew I was watching it through the edge of my curtain. I don't know how, I just do. It never looked directly at me. It had a sort of glanced in the direction of my house, but I swear it knew I was watching, and it didn't seem to mind. It seemed to be pleased with the strange mixture of sinking fear, confusion, denial, and awe at what I was experiencing. And again, I don't know how I know, I just do. What happened next dispelled all my denial. It sort of swung itself off the tree, and instead of dropping down to all fours as one would expect a huge dog to do, it remained standing on its two legs, slightly hunched, and began to walk through the deep snow in the most unnatural way. I don't even know how to describe it. It was just unnatural. It was so wrong. The way it walked, for some reason, was the most terrifying aspect of the whole encounter to me. It just sort of lumbered off behind the houses across the street and out of sight. I didn't speak of this encounter for nearly 20 years after it had happened. I'd never heard anyone else speak of it locally in Ironwood or anywhere else, for a matter of fact, and just chalked it up to another one of the absolute insane things I had seen in my life and never got to speak of or question my sanity. Then one night I was listening to something on the internet and I heard them say Michigan Dogman. My head almost exploded and I couldn't believe it. Other people had seen this? I finally broke my silence, told my wife it was sort of an epiphany I had at that moment. I knew longer I kept my strange experiences to myself anymore. I told everyone who I felt would slightly be receptive to the idea of paranormal or anything cryptid. In my mind, I imagined how long I kept these strange secrets to myself for. Fear of being seen as a lunatic, and how even I thought I was probably insane. and wondered how many people out there were walking around with the same thing I had seen burned in their brain. Now knowing that other people have seen what I've seen and have seen other things makes me feel better. I don't no longer question my sanity. So, thank you for everybody who has shared their encounters with us. It truly is helpful. There you have it, guys. 7 Michigan Dogman encounters. Man, I never get bored of Dogman encounters. I'm just glad my fascination is with Dogman and not Skinwalker. Ugh, Skinwalkers. They scare the living bejesuses out of me. I'm going to do a couple of encounters about Skinwalkers soon, though. Just got a bunch of them laying around and figured I'm going to share them with you very soon. Anyway, I'm almost at 5,000 subscribers. I may hit it tonight. And with that comes a 5,000 subscriber celebration subscriber upload. So with that, guys, I hope you enjoyed these 7 Michigan Dogman encounters. And I bid you farewell.